Fuyang City in northern Anhui lies on the North China Plain, China's northern breadbasket. During the harvest season, 5,000 large combine harvesters reap more than 100,000 hectares of wheat in a week. Riding on the autumn wind and soaring southwards, we'll now see a different scene from the harvest season on the Yangtze River. Many rice paddy fields in the county of Dangtu were originally reclaimed from a lake. To feed more mouths in a region with an abundance of rivers and lakes, people built barriers to block water from entering farmland. The dikes were called Wei, and they ended up enclosing a vast area of low-lying fields surrounded by water. Over the past 1,700 years, more than 20,000 hectares of paddy fields were created in this way. Today, however, locals no longer compete head-to-head with the lakes. More and more of them are letting water back into their fields to cultivate fish instead of grain. As a general rule, wheat is the staple of northern China, while rice is the staple of southern China. Lying on the dividing line between the nation's north and south, Anhui is known for cultivating both. Chinese tradition holds that the boundary between the nation's north and south is the Huaihe River, which runs from west to east through Anhui's northern half. Just over a century ago, China's two halves became connected by this steel bridge. When it first opened, a train travelling at 30 kilometers per hour took over a minute to cross the Huaihe River. Nowadays, high-speed trains flash across the river on a newer rail bridge nearby at over 300 kilometers per hour. From more than a minute before, it now takes only 6 seconds to cross the river. South China is no longer so far away from the north. The trip along the Huai River will begin at a super project. We'll see how a great dam has tamed this mighty waterway. Then we'll explore the most extensive wetland along the river's course before taking a look at a new source of energy. The Huaihe River marks the boundary between North and South China. Midway between the nation's two mightiest rivers, the Yellow River to the north and the Yangtze to the south, its historical path has been changed by both. 8 centuries ago, the course of the Yellow River shifted south to flow into the Huaihe River. When it shifted back again 700 years later, the silt it left behind pushed the Huaihe River itself into flowing south, in turn becoming a tributary of the Yangtze River. If the meandering and shifting Huaihe River has made for fertile farmland, it has also made the region prone to inundation. To persevere in the face of its unpredictable waters, people living by the river have developed a tenacious character. It takes over an hour to drive across the Huaihe River along this road. But it's not really a bridge connecting the river's two banks, but a secondary dam of the Lin Huaigang Water Conservancy project. In total, the project's barriers have been built along an 80-kilometre stretch of the river, like reins holding back the unruly water. Starting in the 1950s, the people here resolved to deal with flooding by facing the Huaihe River head-on. The dams they built intercepted waters pouring down from the mountains and diverted them into a new channel. After being at the river's mercy for hundreds of years, locals living by the Huaihe River finally tamed it. Today, it's become a less unpredictable and more peaceful waterway. In a separate development in 1978, 18 farmers in a village by the Huaihe River called Xiaogang agreed to take the risk of dividing the land of their collective into private plots. Their innovation was followed by a dramatic increase in production of grain. It is now seen as the beginning of China's world-changing period of reform and opening up. Jiaogang Lake is one of the largest wetlands in the Huaihe River basin. When it was a major spillway for floods a decade ago, locals had to live on boats throughout the year. Now that flooding is no longer an issue, they're moving from boats into houses that don't rock on the water. The lake, meanwhile, has become a sea of lotuses. In Panji District, Huainan City, the lake has been transformed into a photovoltaic solar farm. Like the boats of the farm's maintenance workers, its rectangular panel formations float on water. The lake surface here is perfect for harnessing the sun's rays. Meanwhile, its waters cool the heat generated as an unwanted byproduct. As an old coal mining area with a serious subsidence problem, the lake here was previously an unproductive, stagnant pond. Today, these green devices can generate an annual 180 million kilowatts of electricity. The rejuvenated water below, meanwhile, is used for farming fish and shrimps. Next, we will fly over a landmark river island to watch the teeming waterborne traffic of the Yangtze. Then we will climb up the oldest lighthouse on its banks before visiting two of the river's original inhabitants. The Yangtze River is Asia's longest waterway. Its drainage basin makes up 1/5 of China's territory, and it's home to nearly a third of its population. In its lower reaches, 5,000 kilometers from its source in the Tibetan Plateau, the Yangtze flows past this rock hill. The hill was once connected to the rock on the opposite side, but millions of years of water erosion finally separated it. Today, it's popularly known as the Little Orphan. It's an important landmark for boats navigating the river. Some 80 kilometers further down in the city of Anhui, we come to another landmark, the Jianfeng Pagoda. The pagoda is 72 meters tall and was once the most well-known structure by the Yangtze River. Like most pagodas built by rivers in ancient times, it originally functioned as a lighthouse with lanterns placed in its niches. Boats coming up and down the waterway would have seen it from far away, shining like a beacon in the night. More than 2 centuries ago, folk opera performers from Anhui migrated north to the Chinese capital to seek out a better life. No one expected that the music the troops brought with them would eventually become very popular. After mixing with the local culture, a new type of opera was created, Peking opera.